session where we'll be talking about the invariable consequences of a civil marriage. I am going to hand over now to Ms. Mulebogeng Seerani, who will be facilitating today's session. Over to you, Mulebogeng.
Thank you very much. Morning, students. I hope you are doing well and are ready for this today's session. Please don't mind my voice, it's not very well today. Can I please have you always keep your mics off and your cameras off as well? Your mics on mute and your cameras off. How many of you have the case, the textbook, the family law textbook with you? Can I see by show of hands? Okay, thank you. You need to have both the study guide and your textbook with, because we're going to be able to juggle them together. Thank you very much for that. And please, I will be going through the study unit 3. So throughout the process of me giving you this session, kindly write your questions down, and you will have questions and answers at the end of the session. This is just to give us time to go through the prepared session, so we gather everything, because we don't have a lot of time, we only have an hour, so that everyone can get to have an idea of what section 3 is about, and we iron out any questions that you have. Okay, are we okay? Are we good with that? Okay, thank you very much. We will now proceed. Okay, on today's study unit, we will be focusing on study unit 3. That's in your study unit. That's in your study guide, sorry. And we will be touching on the invariable consequences of a civil marriage. This study unit will focus, sorry, on invariable consequences of a civil marriage. Invariable relates mainly to personal consequences of the marriage. Let me get you guys there with, yes, there we go. Invariable relates mainly to personal consequences of a marriage. So we will be focusing on 7 invariable consequences of a civil marriage. The first one is the status of the spouses, meaning where party status change when they enter into a marriage. The second one is constantiam onesiam vitae. It includes material and immaterial things. In the case of Havaga, the court defined Soteniam omnius vitae as an abstraction compressing to the totality of number of rights, duties, and advantages accruing to the spouses of a marriage. It further cleared that one spouse cannot enforce affliction by a court order or an interdict to prevent the other spouse from infringing the right to life and the right of dignity, meaning that you cannot apply to the court for an order to let another spouse leave your the matrimonial home. That was said in Havenga. The third invariable consequences of a civil marriage is a spousal maintenance. In this spousal maintenance, there are 3 components to the spousal maintenance. One is the reciprocal duty of support between spouses. The second one is the household necessities. And the third one is through the Maintenance Act. So we're going to start with the reciprocal duty of spouse.
Good day, through to Momentum Insure Message Center, where your safety is our priority. How may I direct your call?
Nicole Ngube is Her mic is, yes. Thank you. As I was saying, okay, the third invariable consequences of a civil marriage is the spousal maintenance. As I said, it has three components that we'll be focusing on, which is the reciprocal duty of support between spouses. The second one would be the household necessities, and the other one is through the Maintenance Act. So we're going to start with the reciprocal duty of support between the spouses. Well, in the case of Rennick, the court pointed out that the maintenance order can only be satisfied that the person's maintenance, which means the person that the maintenance is claimed for, can actually pay the maintenance. You cannot claim maintenance for someone who's not able to pay out the maintenance. It also applies to both parties. So there is the notion of
Good
that
day, Truth.
a husband is the only person who has to
I'm
pay
fine, and you, ma'am?
maintenance. It's not ideal. It's not. Can we have Nicole to mute her mic, please?
Okay, I've just disconnected her mic. So she
All
will,
right.
unfortunately, then it means she will not be able to ask a question, but that was the only solution. Okay,
Okay. Thank
continue.
you. Thank you very much. So both spouses have a reciprocal duty to each other. Reciprocal meaning they have the right to maintain each other, both the husband and the wife. So there's the liability against the third party whereby there is a spousal maintenance. In a marriage concluded in community of property, the debt will be settled from their joint estate. So the termination of the duty of support comes through by either death or divorce. However, in the case of divorce, there is in the decree of divorce, the decree makes a maintenance order in favor of the one spouse. In the case where there is a separation due to one spouse who supports the other spouse, the duty of support continues. All right. So the second spousal maintenance is the household necessities. In this case, the duty to support coincides with the duty to contribute to household necessities. The requirements for the capacity to incur debts for the household necessities, a spouse capacity to purchase household necessities depends on the existence of the valid civil marriage and a joint household, meaning that there must be the existence of a valid civil marriage. Remember, we tackled that in study unit 1 and 2 of the validity of a civil marriage. And there need to be the existence of a joint household, meaning these people must be staying together. There must be a joint household. And the transactions that they make must relate to the household necessities, meaning that you cannot just buy a personal item and claim that it is a spousal maintenance, whereas it does not contribute to the household necessities. So the revocation of a spouse's capacity to purchase household necessities can only be done by either a court order or by the spouse or the defense that the purchase was not necessary because one spouse had made sufficient funds available to the other. In this case, in this requirement of the defense to purchase, it was cleared out in the case law of Ramsey, where the court rejected the defense of by adopting the objective approach. This we will tackle also later, even in your questions. I see a hand up. What's that hand for? Can you please load down your hand so we don't get distracted?
Okay, it's a historic hand. Rotsiswa, can you please put down your hand? Thank you.
Oh, okay, no, thank you. So, on the third part of the spousal act that comes through the maintenance act itself, it not only covers the maintenance between the spouses, but incorporates any matter where a person might be entitled to maintenance. It meaning that partners in a life partnership and who agreed to maintain each other. Other parties also agree to maintain each other. And then we also have the maintenance complainant and maintenance inquiry. In this part, we're going to focus on the maintenance officer, the maintenance investigator, and the power of the maintenance court. The maintenance officer investigates the complainant and decides whether or not to institute a maintenance inquiry in the maintenance court. That's the duty of the maintenance officer. The maintenance investigator requires to locate a person who is liable to the maintenance or who can provide relevant information and take statement from anyone who may be able to assist with the maintenance investigation. So the maintenance investigator is one who goes out in the field, find out who the person the maintenance is it's made up against, and finds out where the person works. He basically just goes out and makes and does the investigation regarding the person the maintenance is required from. So the power of the maintenance court is to issue a direction compelling an electronic communication services provider to forward information which can be used to trace a person who may be affected by the order of the court. The orders of the court may be made for the payment of the maintenance to the person who is entitled to the maintenance. So note that one can also appeal a maintenance order. So say for instance, when one decides to appeal a maintenance order, you can appeal against the maintenance order, be brought to the High Court. But when this is where the appeal has been brought to the High Court, it does not suspend the duty to pay the maintenance under the previous, or I would say the current maintenance order that's been issued. Unless the appellant alleges that he is not liable to pay maintenance. So say for example, you have there's a maintenance order against you and you want to appeal certain orders in the maintenance order. You can do that through the High Court, but it does not suspend the maintenance order itself that was put out against you. However, only when you do not afford to pay the maintenance order on it, so when you are unable to maintain, to pay the maintenance. Okay, then we move along to the last point of the Maintenance Act, where the enforcement of a maintenance order, enforcement can either be done in a civil sections or criminal sections. All right. Then we move to our fourth invariable consequence of a civil marriage, which is the matrimonial home. It is an invariable consequence of a civil marriage to be shared by both spouses and to have a right to occupy the household asset, to use the household assets. So meaning that when you get married, and then you create or you form your matrimonial home, both husband and wife, both spouses are allowed to share. You are allowed to share the space of the matrimonial home and also use the household assets together. So there's no, this one belongs to this one. No, we all share it together in the matrimonial home. So the donation from, this is our fifth invariable consequence, the donation between spouses can also be made to each other before the commencement of the act are valid. Donation from separate assets to another spouse subjected to provision, it must be excluded from the joint estate, meaning that if you were to donate a certain amount or an item to your spouse from your separate asset, this is not this does not make it to your joint estate. Donations from separate assets do not make it, are excluded from the joint estate. The sixth invariable consequence of a valid marriage is the family name, where a wife, usually the family name only affects the husband, only affects the wife, because now the wife can either keep her name or use her husband's name or use a double barrel between meaning that he gets to use her surname together with the husband's surname. But this does not affect the husband. The husband doesn't have the same options to the family name. Like, he gets to use the family name. He is not affected by this, the invariable consequences of the family name. Someone, this mic is on.
I've just muted them.
Oh, thank you very much. So we are going to our last this is our seventh, which is the last. Okay.
Okay, wait, Mulebogeng, just wait. Student, please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. For now, what's going to happen is if you unmute yourself and we hear you talking in the background, I'm just gonna deactivate your mic, which will unfortunately lead you to not be able to ask any questions. So I am please asking, please mute yourself. Thank you. You can continue.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are now at our last invariable consequences of a civil marriage, which is the headship of the family. According to this was identified according to common law that the husband is the head of the family, and so far this has not been changed. This has still been the case. Please note that the husband being the head of the family, it's the invariable consequences in a civil marriage. This does not apply to a case whereby there's a single woman. It does not apply. This is only in a civil marriage institute. Okay, so we are done with the presentation for study unit 3, and I will be taking questions and we will be answering your questions. Any questions?
Okay, Mulebring, I just want to ask this student, when we talk about the invariable consequences of a civil marriage, do you understand what we are talking about? Now I'm just talking about that concept, the invariable consequences of a marriage, of a civil marriage. Do you understand? Can I get a thumbs up for you if from you student that says yes, indeed we understand what you are talking about, or do you want us to simplify what that term means? We got one thumbs up. If I don't receive or if I don't see anything, okay, I've just seen a hands up, but the person just lowered down their hands. So can I assume that, okay, Anita, you can, okay, Anita has raised his hand, but lowered it. Humbulani, you can ask your question. Humbulani, please unmute yourself and ask a question.
Hello.
Hello, Humbulani.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I don't have question revolving around the topic of today, because I think I understand what it means when you say invariable. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. You can remove your hand. Somebody on the chat just said, please simplify. Invariable consequence basically means the consequences that you cannot contract out of. When you enter into a civil marriage, and let's say you go to Home Affairs and sign the marriage certificate, there are consequences that come with you entering into a marriage, and it will not matter whether you are married in community of property or out of community of property. So invariably means you cannot contract out of those consequences. Okay, Sibonu Kuhle, please unmute yourself.
Good day, ma'am. My question is about the defense of there being enough supplies in the household necessaries. I want to ask if this relates to if the person buys with credit, would the defense be used in that case, or when they buy cash as well? Because I saw a lot of talk about credit in the case.
Okay, Mulubukhen, I'm not sure what case she's talking about. Did you hear the question, Mulubukhen?
Oh yes, I did. You can see. Please go to in the textbook, page 49. Where the Roman figure 3. That's the question from that relates to what the student has given right now. It says that the household necessities on credit making funds available to him or her with which household necessities might be bought. And the defense in the case of Ramsey, where the court rejected the defense, it adopted as a subjective approach and viewed the fact that the dealer's point of view, he had the court adopted the objective approach. The defense was probably have succeeded because buying household items on credit would not be deemed necessary in a household which already has been provided with sufficient fund. Does the student understand?
I understand, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else with a question? Or does anybody want to say something, comment on the invariable consequences of a marriage? When we speak about spousal maintenance, do you understand what we are talking about? Okay, Jonia Relebohile, please unmute yourself.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
There was a question that was asked based on invariable consequences of a marriage. So if I say it's a personal consequences of a marriage,
okay, invariable consequences of a marriage is not really personal consequences. It's those consequences that spouses cannot contract out of. For example, when you get married, when you enter into a valid, legally recognized civil marriage, irrespective of what the marriage contract is going to be. From next week, we are going to start talking about the marriage contract. Irrespective of what the marriage contract is going to be, there are certain consequences that spouses cannot say, I do not want this to apply to our marriage. For example, spousal maintenance. Whether you are married in community of property or out of community of property, spousal maintenance is part and parcel of getting married, of part and parcel of the consequences of entering into a legally recognized marriage. The other example is household necessities. When you enter into a marriage and you and your spouse live together, one of the obligations, irrespective of your type of your marriage contract, you have to contribute towards the household necessities. The other invariable consequence is married spouses owe each other, they owe each other duty of support, which includes providing each other with accommodation. So let's say, for example, you live in a house that you received as an inheritance from your parents, and your parents had left the will in the will they said that we don't want your spouse to have a share in this house. Your spouse will not have a share in that. Let's say you are married in community of property, which is 50-50. Your spouse will not have a share because of what the will says. But in terms of the consequences that cannot be contracted out of, your spouse has a right to live in that house, and they can only be evicted under extremely circumstances, which, for example, if there is an extreme case of domestic violence, or if you are able to provide them with an alternative accommodation. Understand? So those are the consequences that we are talking about. They are not really your personal consequence, but they are consequences that come with being married, irrespective of what your marriage contract says.
So can I please get clarity on
Okay.
the status of the spouse? Number 2, new impediments to a subsequent civil marriage arise as a result of the relationship by affinity that is created by the marriage. What does that mean?
Okay, which page are you on now?
On page 41. There, the
41.
status of the spouses.
Okay, where it says the party status change when they enter into a civil marriage.
Yeah, under on 2, where
Number
it
2.
says new impediment to a subsequent civil marriage arises as a result of the relationship by affinity that is created by the marriage.
Okay, let me just post my introduction. Okay, new impediments to a subsequent civil marriage arise as a result of a relationship by affinity that is created by the marriage. It basically says when you enter into a civil marriage, there's new impediments. In other words, there are certain relationships that you cannot enter into because you've just entered into this civil marriage. For example, there are what we call prohibited degrees of relationship that you cannot enter into once you enter into a civil marriage. For example, if you, let's say as a female, you get married to your husband and your husband has a son who in-law is your stepson. So by virtue of entering into this legally recognized civil marriage, now you are prevented. The law does not allow you to go and enter into a relationship with your stepson or with relatives or family members who are within the prohibited degrees of relationship between the spouses. So this relates to that when you enter into this civil marriage, there is now this impediment, what you are now not allowed, relationships that you are no longer allowed to enter into. Let's say you and this man, you are not married, you are just girlfriend and boyfriend, and then he has a son. The law does not stop you from saying, I do not want to end to be in the, to continue. No, okay, let me put it that way. The law does not stop you from saying, I no longer want to be in a relationship with you, my boyfriend, I now want to be in a relationship with your son. Remember, both the stepson and your blood and your husband are not blood related to you. So as a single person, it is up to you to decide that I no longer want this boyfriend of mine, I now want his son. But once you enter into a marriage, you are no longer allowed to do that, because by virtue of entering into a civil marriage, there are certain relationships that the law stops you from entering into.
Okay.
So you
So,
are
page.
Sorry. Can Humbulani mute her or his mic, please? There's a sound that it's making behind. Thank you very much.
okay. You can continue, Relebohile.
On page 45, there on C, termination of the duty of support.
Mm-hmm.
There it says divorce also terminates the reciprocal duty of support.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are in a process of divorce, or they are still filing the divorce, and the reason why it's because of both of the spouses had affairs. So is it like do you file for maintenance, spousal maintenance?
Okay, we are going to talk about termination of a marriage, ne? But to answer your question now, firstly, reciprocal duty of support means when we enter into marriage, we owe each other a duty of support. This duty of support comes to an end when the marriage comes to an end. But upon a divorce, ne, a spouse who can prove that they are still in need of financial support, then they can apply for post-divorce maintenance, and this needs to be claimed during the process of divorce. Whether somebody had an affair or not, it is irrelevant, because in South Africa we follow the no fault divorce system. The question when it comes to spousal maintenance is the spouse in need of spousal maintenance, and is the other party able to pay that spousal maintenance? That is the questions that are being asked during a termination of the marriage, and when one spouse wants a divorce. But you must know that the general rule is, when you enter into a marriage, you automatically have a reciprocal duty to support each other. When the marriage ends, that duty comes to an end, and then whether the one spouse who's in financial need, if they still need financial support, whether the marriage ended through divorce or it ended through death, there are legislations that actually covers that. For death, there's the maintenance of surviving spouses, and for divorce, you claim it during the divorce process in terms of section 7, subsection 2 of the Divorce Act. But we are going to talk about this when we talk about termination of a marriage. For the purpose of today's session, just be aware that spouses owe each other a duty of support, and this duty of support comes to an end when the marriage ends.
Okay.
Okay, Joanna. Thank you so much. Anita, your hands is up. Anita? Anita, do you want to ask a question? Okay, Anita's hand is down. Is there anybody else who wants to ask a question, or anybody? Anita, please unmute yourself. Anita, please unmute yourself. Anita, we can see your hands, but we need you to unmute yourself in order for us to hear you. Okay, Victor, let's go to Victor. Victor, please unmute yourself.
Good morning, ma'am.
Morning, Victor.
Guys. Yeah, ma'am, if I may just ask, this reciprocal support,
Yes.
is it in the form of monetary value only?
No. Is financially, is providing each other with accommodation, is any form of support that a spouse needs. But at the present moment, we cannot say spouses have a duty to make sure that they emotionally support each other. Yes, they need to emotionally support each other, but the court cannot force a spouse to emotionally support the other party. But they can enforce financial support. They can make sure that a spouse who's not an owner of a house is not evicted from the house. They can enforce or make sure that you pay school fees for your spouse if you have the financial means to do that. So those are the kind of support that we are talking about. And also, can I make it clear that the support is forced on both sides? So if there's a husband who is struggling financially and the wife is able to support, the husband has a right to take the wife to the maintenance court and sue for spousal maintenance, and the wife also has the right to sue the husband for spousal maintenance. Even when it comes to the house, if the house belongs to the wife, unless if there is extreme domestic violence and the lives of the minor children and the wife or the life of the husband, they are actually in danger. The wife cannot evict the husband cannot evict the wife, irrespective of who is the owner. And then when it comes to household necessities, food, cooking, you need to provide each other with food. So you cannot just buy grocery, put it in the fridge and then say, no, that one is mine. If you don't have money, just go outside and then just see where you're going to get food. So you need to support each other, and you cannot say, I am married out of community of property. Because of that, I do not have or I do not want to provide my spouse with food or with financial assistance, because we agreed that we are not going to have community of property. Do you understand?
I'm trying to that is when the civil marriage is still on.
Yes, while the civil marriage is still on. Remember, divorce terminates a marriage. So when the marriage ends, these consequences or these benefits that comes with being married comes to an end. And then whether you're going to get certain benefit post-divorce depends on, when it comes to the support, it depends on whether the parties themselves entered into an agreement whereby they agree that one spouse will be provided with spousal maintenance for a certain period, or if the court has given an order that there needs to be post-divorce maintenance and for whatever period. And then if the court do also say, yes, we are terminating the marriage, but your spouse can continue staying in that house for a certain period of time. But hence I'm saying when we come to the stage where we'll be talking termination of a divorce, then we are going to talk about this in the consequences and what benefits spouses can actually get during the divorce, and what is it that they need to prove, or what are the factors or the requirements that they must first meet before the court can say, okay, we are now giving you post-divorce spousal maintenance.
Okay,
You
all right.
understand?
No, I do. I was struggling to make the difference between the two types of supports, post and during a civil marriage.
Yes.
Thank.
Okay. Thank you so much. Anita, can you please write your question on the chat, because I saw that you said you're struggling to unmute. Please just write your question, then we'll see your question. Spelele? Spelele?
Maybe.
Yes, we can hear you, Spelele.
Okay. So the other invariable consequences of a civil marriage, it's a consensus vitae, right?
Okay. I won't say it is right, but also again, remember, nobody can be forced to be intimate with their spouse if they don't want to. If a spouse forces themselves on you, it's going to be rape, irrespective of what the common law says. So that one is a bit tricky, because it is part and parcel of being married. It's a benefit that comes with being married, but also at the same time, a spouse cannot be forced. So if they don't want to be intimate with you, there is nothing that you can do. And then if you go to court, the court will tell you that we cannot force your spouse to be intimate with you. So previously, before the constitutional era, yes, spouses could enforce that, but now with adults and spouses being given the right to decide on what should happen with their bodies, they now have the right to say, no, I do not want that to be applicable to my life, and that cannot be enforced by the courts. Do you understand? Because that is a principle of common law, but now it's very difficult to enforce, as everybody has the right to bodily integrity, and they have the right to have their body not to be violated.
Yeah, okay. Because I was trying to understand the relationship between consensus vitae and the right to family life, and also the right to dignity.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think I get everything, because which
Oh,
means the right to family life is protected by the Constitution, right to dignity, isn't it?
yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. Because you, student, you must also remember that. Remember, we used to live. We are from the times where, when you are married or when you were in a civil marriage and you had an affair, the third party or the side chick or the side boyfriend could be sued in a court of law. But those now, that has now changed. Spouses or who are in a civil marriage in a perfect world, they are not supposed to be in a relationship with another person. We know that when you are in a civil marriage, you cannot enter into another marriage with somebody else. But if you enter into a relationship with somebody else and you have a girlfriend or you have a boyfriend, now even if as a spouse you take them to court, it's very difficult to say, I want to sue my spouse for having an affair. It is actually a case on that. I've just forgotten the name of the case, whereby you cannot sue a third party for having an affair with your spouse. And also, again, you can take your spouse to court for emotional abuse, but most of the time you'll have to take them to go and get a protection order. But at the end of the day, if you are married, if you are in a civil marriage and your spouse has an extramarital affair, the best thing will be maybe to try and see a marriage counselor and work on your marriage, or to terminate the marriage, because adults cannot be dictated how they can live their lives. So you cannot say to an adult, because you are married, you are not supposed to have an affair. Remember again, we've got the constitution that says we have autonomy and we can decide on ourselves what we want to happen with our bodies, what we want to happen with our lives, and no court of law can actually tell us that I am not supposed not to have a relationship, or I'm not supposed not to be in an extramarital affair, because at the end of the day, that is my right to privacy, my right to live my life the way I want to. And also, again, there is no specific law that says married people be faithful to your wives or be faithful to your husband. So here I was just letting you know that a lot has changed. A lot has changed, and some of the laws that came through because of common law, now because of the constitution, they are actually very difficult to enforce. Okay, Anita, I saw that you wrote a question. Okay, Anita's question is, what does the headship of the family mean from family law perspective? Are these guidelines on what it means to be the head in family law, since it's part and parcel of invariable consequences of the question of the marriage? Okay, in terms of family law, the husband or the man is still the head of the household. But when we come to the reality and what is happening on the ground, many households are now having females as head of the household. Many of them because they are female households, and even in some household where there is a husband and a wife, but you will end up seeing a position where the female is now the head of the household. So in terms of family law, the man is still the head of the household, but practically and in reality, the position has changed. So now, although the law says the man is the head of the household, women are starting to be recognized that they too are now playing the very same role that the men are playing. And because of the constitution, again, women cannot be discriminated against just because they are now the head of the household. So let's say you come upon a family where there's a husband and a wife, but they tell you that the head in this family is the wife. Yes, as an individual, you'll be shocked that I'm used to a situation where the man is the head of the household. This is what I was taught in family law, but because the constitution says we must not discriminate, you'll just have to accept that that family has decided that the woman of the family will be the one who will be heading the household and the ultimate decisions, or whatever the position of the head is, then that will be done by that female. Do you understand, Anita? Okay, you just say you're having a problem with unmuting yourself, so you can, if you want any more clarity or if you understand, you can just write on the chat. Okay, any more questions? Molebogeng, is there anything you want to say?
No,
Molebogeng?
no, I don't have anything. I see another hand. I don't see whose hand is that. I don't know whether it's a previous hand.
Is Joanna Relebohile? You can ask your question. Relebohile?
Is assets fall under household necessities?
Okay, we had household necessities, but we didn't hear the question.
Yes.
Are assets fall under household necessities?
Okay,
What
it
is the question?
depends.
Can you
Assets.
please repeat the question?
Okay, no, I heard the question. She is asking, assets forming
Yeah.
part of the household necessities. So it's going to depend, because remember, assets are many things. A car is an asset. A house is an asset. Furniture is an asset. So furniture forms part of the household necessities, because if you are in the house, you're gonna have to sit somewhere. They cannot say sit on the floor, don't sit on the sofa, because you did not buy it. Ne? And then when it comes to cars, it becomes a bit tricky, because we are married. Let's say we are married out of community of property. Out of community of property, meaning that what is yours is yours, what is mine is mine. Let's talk about a complete separation of property, where we agree that we are not going to share anything. So I can say that asset is mine, because remember, our marriage contract says what is yours, what is mine, and meaning that you do not have any say in my asset. And for this one, I have decided that I do not want you to actually even use them. So when we talk about assets, we need to be specific what kind of asset you are talking about. If I am married out of with complete separation of property, and I've got two houses. The one house is our main matrimonial home where we are staying. I cannot evict my spouse. I cannot say he must not use the household contents. But I have a right to say I don't want you at my other house, because that is my asset. But because we are, it is not part of us where we are staying, you have no right over it because of our marriage contract. So to answer your question, the first thing that we need to determine is what kind of assets are we talking about, because many things are assets. Cell phones are also our assets. We can live in the house together, but as a spouse, if I say I don't want you to touch my cell phone because you have your own cell phone, then you don't have a right to actually touch that. You understand? So although there's invariable consequences, things that you cannot contract out of, but there are certain things that belong to me. Even spouses who are married in community of property, if they both have their own cell phones, and those are the personal assets. So for the personal assets, I can say, don't touch it. Also, I'm not gonna make use of your cell phone because it is your personal asset. When it comes to clothes, those are personal assets. Don't touch my personal assets. I am not going to touch your personal asset. Just because there are consequences that we cannot avoid by being married does not mean that if we are in the same house, you've got the right to actually to everything that belongs to mine. No, there are still certain those personal items that only belong to me, and I can even get a protection order against you for saying, please tell my husband not to go over through my phone, to not to listen to my conversation with my friend. If I am having an affair and my partner or my boyfriend buys me whatever gift, I have a right to say that gift was bought for me. But also it depends. Let's say he bought me a grocery, it's month end, and then they're in the fridge. My husband can say, okay, yes, this were given to you as a gift, but they form part and parcel of the household necessities because of the types of items that they are. Do you understand?
I do understand.
No, but so in summarizing it, I will say we have to determine, we have to separate the personal items, your clothing, your cell phone, something that is extremely personal to you, and with the other types of assets. We have to look as to whether this asset is something that it is really a household need that both me and my spouse we need in the house, and without it, like for example, a fridge. Let's say you get a fridge as a gift and it is the only fridge that you have in the house. You cannot say to your spouse, that fridge, it was given to me as a gift, please stop putting your items in it. You understand? Because it is a household necessity, but there are certain assets, the good one being a cell phone, because most of the time both spouses have their own cell phones. So that's why you can say, but that cell phone you must not touch because it is my personal asset. You also have yours, and also I will not touch yours. Okay.
Okay.
I hope I was able to be clear. Anybody else? Any other question? Okay, student Muleboge, do you want to say anything?
Yes, I see Anita is still has the hand up.
Mm.
I'm not sure if it's from the previous question that they asked
Yeah,
or what.
yeah, I think she's struggling with the mic because I've
Okay.
been observing her, but she did respond on the chat.
Okay.
Okay,
Oh
we've got
no,
Nonkululeko. Okay, Nonkululeko, please unmute yourself.
Hi, ma'am. On page 58, donations between spouses. Can you elaborate further? Who donates to who in a civil marriage?
Okay. Let me answer that. Donations, it doesn't matter who donates to the other. You can either donate to your husband or you can donate to your husband can donate to you. In that it doesn't form part of a joint estate. So donations are personal. They belong to the one who receives the donation. So it can either be either of the parties, either of the spouses. The husband can donate to the wife and the wife can donate to the husband. Or also they can also get donations. Was that clear?
Okay. Oh, all right, ma'am. I see. Even though they have a joint estate, do they also, does the donation also work between them?
Okay,
Okay.
no, student, wait, Muleboge. Firstly, as I said, we are going to talk about the marriage contract starting next week. So student is asking if they have a joint estate. So we need to make it clear that, remember, not all married spouses are married in community of property. So what the student is asking is, if the spouses are in community of property marriage, are they allowed to donate to each other, considering that they have one joint estate? So in other words, if I've got this expensive cell phone and I say I'm donating it to you, a question can be asked as to whether, how can you say you are donating me this expensive cell phone where in-law I actually own 50% of it, né? And on that, Mulebogeng, please don't answer, because next week we are starting the variable consequences of a civil marriage, and we are starting with marriage in community of property. That is when we are going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what is in community of property, what rights spouses who are married in community of property have, what is it that spouses in an income of property are allowed to do. For example, what are they allowed to give away? What is it that they're allowed not to give away? What debt can they enter into without each other's consent? What debt can they not enter into without each other's consent? So it will make more sense to discuss this next week after we've spoken about the concept of in community of property, because for you now to answer this question, we firstly need to talk about what in community of property says. And as I said, we're going to talk about it next week, and then the week after we're going to talk about out of community of property, which is basically divided. There's out of community of property with the accrual, without the accrual, and then with the accrual, but including with the inclusion of community of property. So for now, I don't want us to actually mix most of the issues, because they're gonna end up being confusing to the students. Yeah. So can we agree that when we talk about donation for spouses who are married in community of property, we will answer these questions next week when we talk about marriage in community of property as a marriage contract. Thank you, student. Is there anybody else who has a question? Anybody else? Okay, we see that hence that I think everybody is happy with today's session. Students, thank you for joining today's session, and we are hoping that these sessions are going to assist you as you are studying. Please feel free to send us emails if you still want any more clarity. We have come to the end of today's session, and we shall see each other next week, or we shall meet each other next week. Please, students, can you please study next week? Study, I'm going to tell you the page. Please study from page 61 of your prescribed textbook. That is the variable consequences of a marriage in community of property. Please study that, and also start jotting down the questions that you have when it comes to marriage in community of property. Thank you so much for joining us, and we shall see each other next week. Thank you, Mulebogeng, for today's session. Before we end, I see Victor. Victor, do you want to ask something? Victor
Yes,
Masape? Okay.
yes, please. But I don't know if maybe I missed that. What time will next week's class be?
It's the same time. It's 10 to 11 every Wednesday.
Okay, all right. Thanks a
Yeah.
lot.
Okay, thank you so much. Please, students, please check your announcement. We do may post the announcement, and we are aware of the challenges that you are having with the Moodle site, and we apologize for that. But please, once or twice a week, make sure that you go to the Moodle site and check the announcement. We'll also post the link for next week's session on the Moodle site, but we'll also post it again on the chat section. So thank you so much for joining us. We shall see each other next week. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye.